Astrid Ufberg over there, you might be in a position to have $100 million to hand out, yes?
But a lot of things are not a question actually of money. That's one of the, I think, understandings a lot of us have. But there are lots of interesting things which colleagues have said here. But I would like to add another point here, which I think is very crucial as an entry point into these societies, and that's the teachers in the school and the school system. If we were to, and that's what I would spend money on, if we were to actually give the opportunities to kids, which are our future, we would provide the teachers and the schools with a lot of opportunities to learn about. But there one particular thing which I would like to point out, which is a problem in this case, and that is that in many developing countries, the teacher is just the provider of information, is the person who knows best. There is a need for changing the attitude from being the provider of information, the one who always knows the answers, to facilitating learning. And if that were to happen, and that's a process which is completely outside any technology discussion, it would be a different thing. And if teachers are empowered, they would be able to introduce all kinds, and we don't get a discussion about which kind of technology is to be used, because that's not the point.
I would say, and I'm getting back to it, the 100 millions, whatever you want to provide to us, I would say it has to go to education, to innovation, research. How come Africa has not thought about a computer that's lower than $200, for instance?
Okay, but whose responsibility is it to create this local concept?
It's about local people.
But they don't invent it on their own. Who brings that knowledge?
It's about the market. And if you consider Africa, you got the informal, for instance, sector. 70% of things that are happening, we don't know about them.
Let's not complicate matters by asking too many times what people want and what people need, because I'm not in a position to put thoughts into people's heads, words into their mouths. I know that when that facility is provided, it will be used. And to maximise the provision of that facility, to maximise access, to minimise cost, is really an end in itself. And we don't have to keep asking, how is this going to be used, to the extent that we delay the actual necessary action.
So you come from the "if we build it, they will come" school of thought.
Absolutely.
But there's danger. Now things have gone like, okay, I will deal with a couple of you. I cut off before, so in the spirit of politeness, courtesy and inclusiveness.
My favorite content that has been created, and also one of the best practices, I think we find in the Philippines, where people, once they have access, using text messages toppled the government. And they created probably one of the most valuable pieces of content you can create. They created democracy, and they created social capital. And so I think it goes back to this thing that the ITU has been talking about since the early 1980s, that universal access needs to be put in place. It's a basic human right to be able to communicate. And if we overcomplicate things before we ensure that that foundation has been laid and people have access to that one, we might very well be shortchanging development. We might actually be doing ourselves a huge disservice. Now, finally, this is not an easy thing. See, when people actually communicate and they start creating democracy, that's a scary thought for a lot of governments in the world.
I would like to underline the point you've made, at the risk of making you feel momentarily ignored, but we'll come back to this. Can we just show another of our videos that illustrates absolutely brilliantly what you're saying?
A homestead in the Bolivian jungle. The indigenous people who are expert in making a living from the rainforest without destroying it have lived here for millennia. But to the exploiters of the forest, this has traditionally been seen as an empty place, ripe for logging, mineral extraction and conversion to cash crops. Until recently, the protests of the native forest people were not heard. The internet is changing that. For them, information is power. Under the leadership of the Bolivian Confederation of Indigenous Peoples, they're getting connected. They're realizing their rights to land title and communicating with other groups opposing the unsustainable development of their land.
ICTs are very important for us. They have been an instrument, a tool to inform people on the violations and infractions we endure. Before ICTs, we had a lot of difficulties to spread the news about these violations, about all the things happening within our communities.
So, as you see, a useful tool. Would anyone like to speak specifically to the issue of human rights and the ability of the new forms of communication, whatever they're mediated through, to help? Can we use the issue of human rights, the moral imperative of human rights, to compel governments to behave in ways that they might not otherwise be inclined to do? Did you want to speak to that?
It's important that the role of these international organizations be analyzed, be monitored, and be criticized also, so that their influence, instead of contributing to human development, actually are contributing to some rich people getting more richer. You know.
I think the Secretary General of the ITU might want to address some of those issues. And
may I draw your attention that we have more than hundreds of thousands of villages which are not connected at all. Without these connections, how can we talk about the right to communicate, or how to use the ICTs, or how to make the content?
All right, well, let's throw that to the panel, if we may. Ken Cookie, first of all, compulsion, whether it's moral or legislative or just international censure, what drives this?
Well, I have some bad news. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen if it's done by diplomats in Geneva or in Tunisia, discussing these issues, coming up with little pockets of $100 million here and $100 million there, and trying to spend that through filtering it down through their telecom ministries and through international aid organizations. It will not happen. However, there's a better chance of it happening if there is deeper reform in the governance of these countries, in the regulatory regime, in getting rid of bureaucratic red tape, in fostering the private sector so there's actually capital investment put into the development of the platform for users to do it themselves. If you don't have this decentralized way to allow market forces to take place, it's not going to happen, no matter what we say here in Geneva or in Tunisia.